Welcome to Season 4 of Creatively Speaking, Food for Thought. I'm your host, Leanna Weller-Smith, founder and executive creative director of Weller-Smith Design. In this episode, I sit down with Corrie Locke-Hardy, the author behind The Revolution Will Be Well Fed, Recipes for Creating Community. Corrie takes us on an inspiring journey through her unique path of blending food and activism, culminating in a groundbreaking cookbook that goes beyond just recipes. With a background spanning the restaurant industry, education, and social justice, Corrie shares how her experiences fueled her passion for creating a work that fosters community care and mutual support. Join us as we explore the dynamics of ethical self-publishing, the empowerment of creators, and the transformative power of sweets and social justice. Get ready to be inspired by Corrie's story of turning creative impulses into meaningful action. Let's get started. Hi, Corrie. Welcome to Creatively Speaking.
Hi, Leanna. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I've been so excited to chat with you about a bunch of things. And, this episode, this season of Creatively Speaking is all about finding your path to publishing. And it's not the same for everyone. And everyone has, a different way in to publishing their products. And not only is that a great topic for this season, but I think it's also great even just with the work that you do, in that everyone is different. And, there's so many different people and just different topics that are really hard for people to talk about and to cover. So I feel like they kind of really go well together. So before I start just jabbering away, I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience and tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Corrie Locke-Hardy. My pronouns are she and they. And I recently published my very first book, The Revolution Will Be Well Fed, Recipes for Creating Community, which is sort of a combination of lots of different lives that I have lived. I spent about 9 years in the restaurant industry, focusing mostly on pastry and bread, in a wide range of establishments, but I kind of finished in fine dining. And I then radically switched moves to go back to school for education. And I worked in early education for a couple years and realized that my passion really is combining food and education and social justice and sort of blending together theory and praxis to show people that activism looks so many different ways. We can all engage in community care and mutual support in so many different ways. So that's been taking up the bulk of my time recently, but I also do some consulting on the side and do professional development workshops centered around literacy and having a foundation of social justice in any sort of education space that one has. So many hats.
Yes, I love it. I loved reading about that too, because I was like, how did Corrie get to this point of writing a cookbook and to learn about your past and your past work life really brought that to life. At that point back then, was it a passion or a goal to write a cookbook, or had that not really developed back then?
Oh, definitely. I remember being a teenager, probably maybe 13, maybe 14, and I made these Hello Kitty shaped cakes for something at the library. I was on the teen advisory council or something. And I just kind of remember decorating these cakes in my kitchen and being like, oh my gosh, people do this. People can write a cookbook. Things that I make could be photographed in a book one day. Whoa. And, I feel like that seed kind of maybe a sprout at this point. Kind of like sprouted up and then like stayed in the back of my head as something that would be really cool to do, but I had no idea the process or how or, you know, this was probably, if I was 13, it was probably the early 2000s. So like the food landscape and the culinary like industry itself looked very different too, with like cookbooks and things like that. So yeah, it kind of hung out for a while and it finally happened.
Yeah, and I love how this cookbook really has combined, like you said, all of the work that you have done. So in moving on in your work journey and going back to school, once this started to actually become an idea, like what's sparked this project initially? Like, was there a moment that was like, oh my gosh, I could take this piece of my life and this piece and put it together?
Strangely enough, I feel like maybe it's not strangely enough. Maybe I'm just the maybe the patriarchy just taught me I need a caveat before I say anything. Um, but I sort of tend to get ideas in phrases, almost sort of like a marketing campaign. There's like a lot of alliteration. I don't know, it's just how my brain works. But so I kind of thought of the phrase sweets and social justice, and I was like, that has a great ring to it. I should see if it's a hashtag. And so I saw that it in fact was not a hashtag online, and I was like, that could be a really cool pairing of ideas. This was probably 2020, 2021, and I was just kind of looking for something. I wanted to follow the dopamine. And so I sort of like started trying to combine baked goods or pastry in some way and like talk about a book that had a social justice theme or perhaps was nonfiction. And it just kind of, I like tossed it around in my brain for a few months. And I then sort of like after the sweets and social justice, I came up with what was initially the working title, although it is now the title and I'm very excited about, which is The Revolution Will Be Well Fed. And then again, I was like, to the internet, this has to exist. This is the most clever thing that has ever come into my brain. And shockingly, that title was not taken. So yeah, I think kind of from there, I had these ideas and these phrases. And so I started to do more research about what it sort of meant to become, like, to actually get into publishing as a writer. Because at this point, I had been doing book reviews on Instagram. I had been writing curriculum. I had been doing some sort of, quote unquote influencer things about education. So yeah, just kind of follow the dopamine and dove in.
Yeah. So I have my copy. I have a copy. I'm so excited. I love it. I'm just going to show it because we are on video. And so some people do watch the YouTube and I absolutely love it. And I have a signed copy, so I'm special. And but when we met, I was just very curious, first off, about this journey that we're going to talk about, and from this idea to how you got published, because it is definitely not the traditional path, I would say. It is, but it's not. But when I received the product and I actually was able to experience it, and that opened up a totally different, just a bunch of other questions and just thoughts. And I do have to say, like, I love it. What I love about it is that I feel like, you're talking about so many really heavy topics in here. And you are providing insight for people who may not really understand a lot of these concepts, not concepts, but these topics, right? But it's in a very you're talking about these things in a very easy to absorb conversational way, and there's no judgment here. Like, what I love about it is you are stating fact, you're stating what history has shown us. But then on the other side, you're showing a positive as to how we can bring change. And through something so simple as not simple, I mean, food is complex in its own right, but something as simple as food. And I love the presentation of everything, how this came to be. So I just wanted to say that because I feel like, when we think, some people, when they think of cookbooks, it's like a typical product, but I think everything from this piece, it really feels very grassroots and very, um, not processed product, that it is still created. So it's still processed in its own way. But I really wanted to say that how much I love that. So in order to get to this end product, how did you have, you had these ideas, you had these sparks of different topics that you want to touch on. Did you just start writing the full manuscript, or did you start to kind of look into working with agents, or how did you kind of prepare this manuscript and go about that first step in the process?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's exactly how I wanted readers to feel when they opened the book. The goal was for people to go through and be like, wait a minute, I need to know more. Because so much of social justice work individually and as a movement is about self-reflection and education, and really training that impulse to take that accountability and be empowered to find out more by yourself. Because also nobody wants a textbook with a handful of recipes. Like I would, but not everybody does. So thank you. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And, you may or may not be surprised to learn that I did nothing according to plan, because as I explained it to somebody else, I find a weird side door entry and I just kind of shuffle in, and people are like, what, you're here? And, there I am. But so kind of, I would say around the beginning of 2021, I got the opportunity to attend a free webinar, and that was all about being interested in writing and publishing a cookbook. And that coincidentally, that webinar was put on by somebody you and I both know, Sally Eckes, who is a lit agent. And she was not my agent at this point. She was just a lady who was smart. And then coincidentally, we ended up living very close to each other. So I digressed. I attended this webinar and sort of got more information about the process and sort of what would be needed.
What's interesting is publishing first, let me just say, is probably the most complicated process ever.
So
And you don't have somebody like a Sally or somebody who can at least give you the steps of, okay, you have an idea. Let's turn this into a proposal. And then let's do that, because there's all these little things you must check off. And I think that's kind of,
Yeah. There's a lot of things to kind of get in order, and there's things that you don't think about. And so that was extremely helpful. And kind of at the end of that, Sally said, hey, does anybody want to pitch me their idea that they're interested in? And I was like, absolutely. Who wouldn't take anybody up on that opportunity? And, I kind of gave her a very rough idea. I was like, I have this phrase, the revolution to be well fed, maybe snacks for smashing the patriarchy. I'm kind of picturing baked goods, social justice. And Sally was kind of like, I think that's a really interesting idea. Here are some tips and, for you to take further steps. And then I was off. And one of the pieces of advice that I got was to look at comps, comparable titles that had been released in the last few years, and kind of look and see the layout and the photographers and the concept. And then to also, Sally said, to look at the acknowledgments and see if there were any running themes of, okay, these 10 books that you really love are all put out by the same publisher, and like 6 of them have the same agent, kind of thing. So that was extremely helpful for me. And it's also a piece of advice that I give to other people as well pretty regularly. So when I was doing that, I came across this really cool feminist cookbook called the 2019 Washington Women's Cookbook. And it was printed on risograph, which is extremely cool. I will not butcher the actual art process by trying to explain it. However, it's like a printmaking process. And this book took all of the suffragette activists that had been left out of the original 1919 Washington Women's Cookbook because they weren't affluent and white enough, basically. And this cookbook did recipes and, sort of historical tidbits about these suffragettes. And I thought that concept was so cool, and it was exactly what I was looking for. And I really like that framing. So at the bottom of that publisher's website, it said, "Have a great idea? Send me an email." And one thing to know about me, I can follow directions really well. So I was like, okay.
I love it. Just the action taker.
Yeah. I was like, I do have a good idea, so I will email you. And so I ended up emailing the publisher, Raspberry Bow Press. The publisher's name is Michelle, and she worked in some larger West Coast houses for about a decade, like Clarkson and Potter and Sasquatch, and then was kind of like, I can do this more ethically, and I can give bigger royalty percentages to the authors that I work with if I do this myself. So she did, which I really appreciate, just as a quality in a human in general. But yeah, so we ended up chatting, and she was like, my press is really small. We haven't done things, but like I do cookbooks. That's what we want to get into. And she was like, I would love to publish your book. And I was like, great. I guess I should write it then.
I love the action. This is one of the reasons too why I wanted this conversation so much, is because I think that's what people get in their head and they don't just kind of go for it. Like, just like we were just saying, there's all these things that check, 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 check. Well, there is another way. And I really want people to realize that just by being curious and looking at these books, following the advice that, Sally provided, and then just letting that snowball and saying, hey, what harm can come from me sending an email? If they say no, come back later, or no at all, or whatever, that's just one no. Like, and so I think that's really a big point that I found, and that's just the beginning of your like snowball effect, I think, when it comes to this.
Yeah, I somehow found myself with no agent and no book, but with a book deal. Um, but I think it also kind of speaks more to the grassroots nature of it as well, because Michelle was very candid and was like, we're small. We only do a couple titles, like you'd be taking a risk. And I was like, you'd be taking a risk on me. And I really appreciate it. So I hate to sound like Gen Z now, but like the vibes were right.
Yeah.
We just like had a call, and it was great.
That's magical. Like that really, those moments, you have to kind of run with that. Like when you feel like, hey, yes, they're taking a chance, you're taking a chance, but that it's this, you feel like you're in alignment on so many levels. Like even just the whole Rizzo press and all of that, like even when you told me that initially, I was like, oh my God, like I have a little mini Rizzo at home. So to me, that was like, that is fantastic. And how are they doing that? And so I would love to just tell us a little bit more about like once once you guys were like, okay, we're gonna do this and we're gonna make it happen, like what then became your process between the two of you? Like how did you manage all of those other pieces of the puzzle that do come with publishing?
Yeah, well, I was very lucky in that I do, just from kind of, I generally describe it as working tangentially to the publishing industry because, I'm doing a lot of reviewing and marketing and things like that. But, and I do consulting and freelance for publishers for equity and sensitivity readings, and stuff like that. But I'm not, full-time 24/7 at the publishing industry. So we basically came up with a date of when I would turn in a manuscript. And Michelle was kind of like, all right, let me know if you need help. I'll read the whole thing in 5 months. And I know that this isn't like maybe everybody's ideal working process, but it's perfect for me. I love just being sort of given a deadline for a few months from now and said, like, you do your thing. You do what works for you. We have a general idea, we have a general theme. And then once I get the initial first draft, then like we'll go from there. But Michelle and the designer, Tim, were extremely nice. They were extremely willing to be creative, and they really emphasized that they wanted the whole process, that they didn't want to lose my voice in it. Mm-hmm. And that was really nice as well. And it also kind of extended, the whole grassroots thing too, once we ended up getting a photographer, Manuela, who is absolutely incredible. She is an extraordinarily talented photographer, but she typically does fashion and like product shoots. And she had never done a full cookbook before. And so on the first day of the shoot, she came over and she was like, oh, thank you so much for like taking a chance on me. I've never done a cookbook before. And I was like, I've never done a cookbook before, like, thanks for being part of the experiment.
Yeah, it's perfect circle. Yeah.
And yeah, it just, I don't know exactly how to describe it. Yeah, it was like a fever dream, but in the best way.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I like the interior, like I love it. Like it looks like it's a mix of Rizzo print and probably digital printing, I think. It looks like it anyways, but I love that hand quality because there are certain like little details in there and I'm like, oh my God, like this is that excites me just because like you said, it really feels like the whole product, everyone who had their hand in it really was on the same vibe. Like they really like everyone was on the same page with this. I noticed you have three main chapters and it's breakfast, dessert, and I have it written down there, and snacks. Yeah. And
three best food groups.
Which is perfect. And I love how you just describe how you like this is not about like having everyone over for a big meal. This is for these smaller interactions and how you can support in different ways. Since they were like, okay, go write it. Once you did write it, was the publishing team part of like, okay, we should divide it this way, or we should design like, was there some collaboration in some ideas that you have in terms of design with them, or was it really a matter of here's my document and let's see what you come up with?
I definitely do not consider myself any sort of graphic designer. I have patience to like brown butter for 45 minutes, but I do not have patience to move pixels around on a screen. I will flip the table in under 5 minutes. But and I like kind of had the idea, but my feeling was very much like, just because I wrote the words, it's a collaborative effort, and there are so many other aspects to it that nobody thinks about, and I think it's kind of an extension of the saying like, oh, you don't notice good design, you just notice bad design. I think I got distracted. I'll try to rein it back in and answer your question actually. But I would say, well, one thing that made me feel very involved was actually I got to go out for the photo shoot.
Perfect.
Yeah, so everything in the book is I baked, and honestly, that was very soothing for my anxiety, because I like knew what it looked like. But it was also really cool because it felt like again another extension of like this grassroots like collaborative effort. And the food stylist that we worked with was really incredible. We shot at her studio, which had a full kitchen, and it was fabulous.
And they set all that up for you, right? Like they were able to guide you in that. You didn't have to
Yeah,
figure any of that out.
yeah. I just basically had to show up, and I gave my opinions of stuff like what I thought would be the easiest to bake for like what days of the photo shoot and stuff like that. But I I entered this situation and I enter most situations by being like, okay, here's what I know, but you're the professionals. So I'm not precious about, my words or my thoughts or, like what if it looks this way? Because I don't do this every day. So it's fine with me if other people have opinions, and like design ideas and stuff. So I think that kind of made it really fun and collaborative too.
Yeah. And I think it feels very cohesive. Like I said, my first impression, I could just, everything just felt really, in alignment with each other. Like, so the design, the typefaces, all the type stylings, so beautiful. Love it. It is so fun. I cool. It is so fun. Again, it goes back to like, it's very zany. And if I could have lived in that era of just doing zines and all that back in the day, that's where I would live. And so to me, I just felt like it all really came together. And like I said, too, with such powerful topics on top of it, I think that it was really molded together nicely. So while none of you knew each other or knew, like you weren't, collaborating from the very second that the idea came, like I do feel like it was a great group that was put together by the publisher.
Definitely.
Yeah. So something you said even earlier was about that you would get bigger royalties. And I would love for you to touch on that. Advances, royalties, who's paying for the photographer. All those are questions that come up in traditional publishing world. And a lot of that lands on the author. But it's a little bit different for you in the situation. So I'd love for you to just talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also, in general, I think it's great that we have open discussions about this, specifically, about money and for people that, identify or maybe were raised as uncultured female, like people don't generally want to talk about it. And we're not going to have change in equity if we don't talk about it. So
Mhm.
I'm perfectly happy to talk about it. Um, and I got no advance. And Michelle was very upfront about it. And it was kind of one of those conversations about like, we're so small, we can't give you an advance, but like, because we can't give you an advance, we want to do bigger royalty percentages. So my percentages start at 20% until that like initial publisher investment is paid off. And then it goes up to 40%, which I cannot tell you how pleased and nice that is to not only be an emerging author and sort of like be taken seriously and, been like, oh, you're really worth like a significant portion of this. I'm a little bit more familiar with picture book percentages and stuff like that because that's generally what I work in. But working for a big house, one of the big five, you're looking at about 6% royalties, and then you're splitting it with the illustrator. And even though you'll get an advance and you'll get a couple payments, the percentages are much, much smaller, and very well established authors and illustrators they shoot for about 14% royalties, and give or take, not certainly not an exact science, but just sort of as you can see there, that's a huge disparity, and which is also why we maybe only see certain books being traditionally published, or books that have like a really wide appeal because they want sales guarantees.
Yeah.
And I obviously could talk about this forever.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's why Sally really connected us, because she knows that we work with the self-published author.
yeah.
And in the end, my goal is to help people that are, I mean, this is their content. This is what this is their IP. This isn't somebody else's content. And they're getting the least amount back for the work that they're putting in. And I really, I really believe that, how we can help our clients. Yes, they are paying us. However, in the end, we take no royalties. We want them, and we give them options. Like, you can go this route and get this kind of distribution. You can do direct to consumer. We give them options because it's up to them and their goal and how they want to kind of take their product then out in the world. Not, it shouldn't be based on, there just shouldn't be so many rules and so many barriers for people to cross to get their work published and out in the world and into the people's hands that really want it.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, I know all sorts of authors traditionally self combination. And like, really, all at the end of the day that you want is a really quality product that's beautiful and, like reflects and represents the original goal. And advice that I have given other self-published authors, or, folks that are maybe querying for larger houses is like, it's really worth it to look outside, hire an editor, hire somebody, to look over the design. Like, the product will be so much better in the end. So it's nice that, like, to not only have your podcast and have your company, but because it's not predatory. And like, there are so many other companies that are trying to do what you're doing, but in a much more predatory way.
Yeah, no, I think there's, like I said, even in the beginning, like, there's a path for everyone. And for you being curious and
Yeah.
looking and following that advice and finding your own path. And like I said, that's what this whole season is going to be about, because there's so many different ways that somebody can bring a product out into the world. And I think that that's of value for people. It doesn't have to be this way or this way or this way. It can be so many different ways. And
Absolutely.
it's just you being curious and finding the path that works for you. Um, so they found the photographer, they did all of that. They did the printing. I love it. It looks beautiful. I love it. It's like I said, it fits my personality. Aside from the design, the content, I think, is, like I said, have said a few times, very powerful. But I'm wondering, once the book was produced, I know there's some other nuances with this publisher in that, they're not using some of the big distributors that are out there. They're kind of taking a different path. So can you tell me a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the first printing, ultimately Michelle decided, but like, I was very much a part of the conversation, multiple times, which I really appreciated, and like got a chance to give feedback. And what we decided to do for the first printing was to use a small press based in North America. Both for turnaround time, but then also the sustainability aspect of not having it have to come in a shipping container across the ocean. So
Yeah.
that was really nice that they were kind of like willing to discuss those nuances. Another one was, this is one of my favorite stories, that I was like, yes, Michelle is the one. So we were talking about exactly. We were talking about the photographer and everything. And before I could bring it up to her, she was like, I just have to let you know, so far on this project, it's just me and you, and we're both white ladies. So like, we should figure that out. And I was like, Michelle, that was on my list of things to tell you. And so that made me feel really good, kind of ethically, and also that was something that the publisher had noticed and was like, I don't like this. So yeah, we were able to find a photographer and also the food stylist, Christina. And which we also found out, she told us during the photo shoot, she's the only full-time food stylist of color working in Seattle right now. At least when we were doing the shoot, at the beginning of the year. And she was like, I have a friend who does it part-time, but like I'm the only one. And so not only was I really excited that we could book her for the shoot, but I also feel like that speaks to kind of what Michelle and I were talking about in general in like an overarching way, because I do think it's really easy to, not notice those types of things, and like what the crew demographics are that are working on a project. And so I really liked that intentionality a lot.
Yeah, it all fits together. It adds another level or another layer, I think, of just how intentional all the decisions were with this.
Another decision that we also made was to not have it be carried on Amazon, which I know that Michelle is looking into distribution, but some of that is like it's absolutely required, or just like with any sort of company, there's all sorts of things.
Yeah, there's lots of steps in there too.
Yeah, especially with things like distribution and stuff like that, which I don't know very much about. I just sort of know like a basic overview. But yeah, that was kind of another thing that I really appreciated.
So they're pushing this out to indies, right? So that's really where people can find your book, indie bookshops, I would say. And I love that idea too, again, because it adds another layer to the intentionality of the product and the vision behind it. How has that been going? Because the book was just launched, right? Like, I think it's not even been a month. I think it's only been like maybe 15 days or 20 days.
Yeah, 15 days, 2 weeks. It's been going really well. I am also an indie bookseller, and something I know about other indie booksellers is that we love to champion the little guy and the other indies. And my publisher, Raspberry Bow Press, also has an indie bookstore out in the Skagit Valley. So, just another example of alignment. Yeah, it has been getting really good reception so far, which just warms my little gay heart so much. Although, ironically, during Banned Books Week, I
saw this.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're bringing it up.
Yeah, so there were a couple of other instances before this one that I'll, talk about, of like folks editing my bio to take out that I was queer, and, other places that they were like, oh, we really want to print your recipe, but we don't like the name. The name is too political. Like, we only want to publish it if you let us
change the title of the recipe.
Yeah, change the title of the recipe and edit the head note so that it wasn't political. And I also had other groups that were like, oh, I need like a line by line what you're going to talk about, because like we need to make sure it's not too political. My feeling is there's actually nothing really political in the book at all. It's just kind of talking about historical narratives, the media, your own personal ethics and responsibility. Yeah. Human rights aren't radical, so like I don't think I'm radical. But sort of like had those instances, and then last week during Banned Books Week, I had been working on planning this really cool panel discussion up in Maine with a couple, with a nonprofit and a college, to sort of talk about like food access and, the political nature of food and community care and stuff. And then at the last meeting, then basically they told me that they weren't going to work with me anymore because they were too afraid of repercussions from the community and like specifically law enforcement in general. And like that's real and valid, but like also I'm really not that radical, y'all. I could have been so much more radical in here.
It's really upsetting because, like I said, again, back in the beginning, like I feel like these are topics that they don't understand. And we know that is the problem, and they're not willing to be open to learning how to make change. And I think you even mentioning the recipes, that was the titles. That was one of the things on my list, which is I love these titles. Like I love like, I mean, let me find one. Okay, so let me find. There was one that was like, what is it? Yeah, here it is. Granola bars, not prison bars. And I love that. But I mean, and then you talk about, a few words on the prison industrial complex. And everything is tied together. It's not meant to be disrespectful or radical in any way. It is about making these topics a little bit more palatable and how you can learn about them, how you can make change. You have a whole section in the back about, books to read, to kind of learn more. And even within each section, what can you do right now? Like, so you are really trying to open up the conversation for solution. And that's really sad that they took that opportunity and they lost the opportunity. So when you do that panel with someone else and you get to share your gifts and your words with the people that will take that and keep feeding back into others and their community, I think that you're going to find the right audience for that. They obviously weren't, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree, and it's kind of, it's more annoying than it is like upsetting. Yeah. And, there's so much to be said about banned books and soft censorship and soft banning and things like that. But I mean, I think it comes down to the fact that like I am so proud of this book and specifically the recipe names because like activism is, I consider myself a community organizer. Like activism isn't fun all the time, and it's like really draining, but also it is really funny. And part of that healing and part of like what makes you able to get up every day and, try again is those really silly moments and like having an understanding that like joy is actually resistance and it's actually activism. And there are so many communities that people don't want to exist, but like the fact that those communities can hang out and like eat snacks and be silly is like the purest form of activism, to me at least. So I wanted kind of like an approachable, easy way to talk about a lot of these topics, like granola bars, not prison bars. But also, I just want to whet your appetite. I just want to give you a little nugget of information, and then I want you to seek out like what else you need to seek out and like what else you need and want to learn about. And I really hope that the recipe names make you chuckle and also make you want to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you go from here? What's next? Where can people get their hands on this product? When are you doing any sort of book signings? What is the plan for this launch since we're so new into it?
Well, you can order any copies from my publisher, Raspberry Bow Press, and the bookstore that I work at, High Five Books in Florence, Massachusetts. We have signed copies there. We have unsigned copies there. If, I don't know, that'd be weird if you wanted an unsigned copy. But here we are. Yeah, and then I think Michelle and I were actually talking about potentially doing a West Coast tour in the spring, and maybe doing some signings over on the West Coast. And yeah,
sounds like fun. Good stuff coming up.
All sorts of stuff coming up.
Yeah. So, if you were to offer some advice to somebody who is thinking about creating something or wanting to become more active with activism, even like, do you have some words of advice or places to, have them turn? What would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, it's very boring and mundane, but it is, if you're interested in something, then your personal self should go learn about it. And This doesn't mean that you call up your friend who maybe has that identity that you're wondering about. Like, I don't know, people call up and ask me gay questions all the time. So we can use that as, as an example. And like, sure, I'll answer, but also it's like way more interesting and gratifying if you're like, oh, I'm wondering about like this aspect of queer identity. And, like you hippity hop into Google and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I didn't like phrase that question exactly right, but like I got a little bit of info. Let me try again. The trial and error process of like learning and understanding and like really, really understanding the industry or like whatever you want to enter, okay, maybe it's self-publishing, a middle grade book, for example. Okay, so how many middle grade books have you read? When did they come out? What sort of authors do you like? Do you like when they're in verse? It's to kind of like really become familiar with whatever industry that you're interested in, because that gives you the ability to have more opinions and you're like better able to sort of like express and advocate for yourself, whether that's with, the customer service person on the support for your layout software, because you're like, designing it all yourself. Yeah. Yeah. But like, even if you're doing it all yourself, there's going to come a moment where you have to ask somebody for something. And, the more information you know and like the more familiar you are, then like the easier it is to get those answers.
Yeah, I love that advice. It really, and going back, just being curious, do the research, look and see what resonates with you in whatever topic you're trying to learn more about. So, um, well, Corrie, I am so thankful to have met you, and I wish you all the best with the upcoming events and different things that are happening with the book. And I can't wait to see where everything goes. But I really just want to say I appreciate the time that you took to really walk us through this process and how you were able to make this happen by being curious.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that I got to come and chat with you and share my journey. I hope it helps and resonates with some folks. Or if it doesn't, then, it seems like I impacted you that way too. So take that.
There you go. Well, I will make sure to have all of your links in the show notes, so they'll know where to find you, they'll know where to get the book. And if you guys are curious and you have questions about bringing Corrie in to talk about, things you want to have her on a panel or something, then get curious and send her an email.
I'm here. Send me an email. I send emails all the time.
Exactly. Thanks so much, Corrie.
Thank you.